Are Tibetan people Chinese?
Do you?
Yes. They are Chinese people.
Of course.
Did you?
What Chinese history? You should know the history. You don't know the history.
Passions rise over a dispute that stretches as far back as the 13th century.
Have you been China? Have you been Tibet? If you don't know, shut up.
The new documentary, When the Dragon Swallowed the Sun, delves into the debate over Tibet. China has long claimed sovereignty over the country and in 1950 sent in troops. An action Beijing says liberated the region from brutal feudalism, but many Tibetans say it was an invasion. 9 years later, after an unsuccessful revolt by his people, the Dalai Lama fled and set up a government in exile in India. That is where many Tibetans remain. The Dalai Lama has always maintained he's not seeking Tibetan independence from the Chinese. He says he only wants enough autonomy to protect his people's traditional Buddhist culture.
In their minds, there were always this kind of hope that any minute they might go back. But that is not there now, you see.
In his film, Dirk Simon explores some of the reasons why, 6 decades on, their struggle continues.
Unfortunately, there's actually a huge lack of leadership, and there was a huge lack of unity. And this lack of leadership seems surprising because they have a great leader, the Dalai Lama. But I think for decades he has been saying that he doesn't want to get into politics so much. And he wanted his people really to take care of themselves in a political way.
So to a certain extent, the story here is that the Dalai Lama has lost touch with what Tibetans want, to a certain extent?
I think he had the best intentions, but he underestimated that the own will of the younger generation that doesn't want to negotiate with the Chinese about autonomy. They just desire freedom and independence. And for the older ones, for the older generation, for them it's very difficult to make up their mind because they are just used to follow him.
The film, which was 7 years in the making, also takes us inside Tibet for a rare glimpse of life in the capital, Lhasa.
When I was there, it was like martial law in 2008, and there was people looking into people's faces. You could sense that oppression, you could feel that fear. I mean, we were in front of the Jokang Temple, which is a very famous site also for all the pilgrims, and there was a spectacular sunset, and people were just stopped watching. So they stopped walking so they could watch the sunset. And within 2 minutes, we had the square swarmed with police and army and pushing everyone and forcing them to keep going. So they were so afraid that more than a few people would stay together, and perhaps there's another riot, so people couldn't even stop watching a sunset.
China maintains it's brought economic development and growth to the region and improved the lives of the Tibetan people. Beijing also says that their human rights are respected. How different is the narrative between Tibetans living in Tibet and Tibetans living outside of Tibet in exile, as a diaspora?
Perhaps not everyone, but I think for the Tibetans who live in exile, when they don't feel the pressure, and they have this kind of freedom in a sense, that it becomes easily just an empty statement to say, you know, I'm willing to give up my own life for the freedom of my country. It's very different than to be in Lhasa and to go on the street and to risk literally your life for your freedom.
Every day, more and more Chinese settlers are moving into Tibet. There are already more Chinese soldiers in Tibet than Tibetans.
What's the way forward, do you think?
Tibet will not just be given up by the Chinese. I think that's a dream. We cannot solve the issue without China.
Struggle is not just for freedom, it is a struggle for survival.
We have to do something. What shall we do now? What do you think best solution for us?
And if the world wants to believe or needs to believe that they're really fighting for survival, then Westerners cannot lead that campaign. The Tibetans have to. Someone has to take on that role, and he has to come from within the Tibetan community.
CNN has reached out to the Chinese government for its reaction to the documentary. We are still waiting for a response.